Well, hello, everyone. I am Tommy Lahren, along with Joey Jones, 𝗖𝗍KITG, and Joe Concha. Welcome to the big weekend show. And the big story tonight is a Fox News alert. More strikes in the Middle East today as Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates all report new interceptions of Iranian missiles and drones. These attacks come just hours after Iran's president apologized to neighboring countries for their attacks, saying the regime will halt their strikes unless it's hit first. They've attacked at least 11 countries since Operation Epic Fury began last Saturday, in addition to Israel, which launched their own attacks today. Among them, a university that the Israeli Defense Force says is used by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to train its officers. Meanwhile, the United States is increasing its military presence in that region, with a third Navy aircraft carrier strike expected to join the fight. President Trump spoke about the success of Operation Epic Fury earlier today.
The result, and it's been amazing. We've knocked out 42 Navy ships, some of them very large, in 3 days. That was the end of the Navy. We knocked out their Air Force. We knocked out their communications, and all telecommunications is gone. I don't know how they communicate, but I guess they will figure something out. It's not working out too well. And they're bad people. They're just bad people.
And here with the latest is Lucas Tomlinson, live from Dubai. Lucas, what can you tell us?
Well, good evening, Tommy. It was a rather diplomatic affair there in Doral from President Trump, but he had some more shots to take on Truth Social. Let's let the audience read it with us. The president threatening Iran, probably with some knowledge about those strikes that decimated Iran's oil refineries outside of the capital. President Trump saying today Iran will be hit very hard under serious consideration for complete destruction and certain death because of all Iran's bad behavior are areas of groups of people that were not considered for targeting up until this moment in time. Now, Tommy, no country has been hit harder by Iranian missiles and drones than this one. From where I'm standing, over 40% of Iran's missiles and drones have been launched at this country. That's twice the number that have been launched at Israel. Tonight, a skyscraper here in Dubai 23 Marina was hit by falling debris after a drone was blasted out of the sky. The Dubai media office says debris fell onto a car, killing a Pakistani driver inside. And this morning, a drone also managed to slip through Emiratis air defense systems and hit the Dubai airport, shutting down operations for a short time. Emirates, the largest airline in the Middle East and based here in Dubai, said it has resumed flights but on a limited basis. And Iran's president went on TV today to apologize for firing drones and missiles at its neighbors in the Persian Gulf, but was immediately contradicted by state media moments later.
We didn't intend to violate neighboring countries. As I have said many times, they are our brothers. We stand with the ones we love in the region.
And over 1,200 Iranian drones and missiles have been launched at this country, over 92% intercepted. Now, overall, thanks to American and Israeli forces, ballistic missile launches are down 90% overall since the start of the war, and drone attacks are down 83%. Now, officials here in the UAE say they have frozen all of Iran's assets, financial assets that are here in this Gulf state. Many people, though, are not afraid, Tommy, walking the streets. The Dubai Mall behind me, many people just think it's business as usual, seeing the 𝗏𝒆𝒂𝒅𝒏𝒄𝒆, the tallest building in the world. Also, the horse racing has not stopped. And, of course, you have the Dubai World Cup coming up in 3 weeks here in Dubai, one of the richest races in the world. I know you'll be watching, Tom.
Absolutely. We'll be watching you, Lucas Tomlinson. Thanks so much, and stay safe. All right, President Trump again emphasized the importance of taking out the Iranian regime earlier today.
When you look at October 7th and beyond October 7th, look at all the killing that they've done over the years, for 47 years. And this had to be done. They were very close to a nuclear weapon.
And now the president is laying down the terms for an end to the conflict, writing on Truth Social, quote, "There will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender." But Iran's president is dismissing these terms, saying it's a, quote, "dream that they should take to their grave." Very interesting. All right, bringing it out to the table, Joey. President Trump's very interesting because he starts out saying, I want to negotiate, diplomacy first. And then if you don't want to negotiate, he says, all right, now the only thing I'm going to accept is an unconditional surrender. It seems like he's really in the driver's seat here. And listening to him talk, he seems pretty confident.
Yeah, you know, he's saying things like he's going to have a say in who runs Iran. I think he has a say because literally whoever they put out there, if he doesn't like them, he just hits a button and they're dead, right? So that's how you have you have like a de facto process of elimination say. I think he has no choice but to keep the pressure and keep the tough talk and keep unfortunately, the war going long enough for them to understand the only path out of this is for them to be out of it, meaning the totalitarian regime that's there now. I don't know who's going to be the successor. I don't even know who's running this country right now. I don't know that there is a consolidated monolithic leader. I don't believe there is because just as we're reporting, you know, they're apologizing in one moment and sending rockets and missiles and drones the next to these other countries. I think President Trump needs to continue to hit the targets. They've got their list. They need to keep going through it. I think Israel's doing the same.
Real quick, just a follow-up to that. What do you think the strategy is from the Iranian side? I mean, they're attacking Dubai more so than they are Israel. And then they're saying, as you mentioned, oh, we didn't mean to do that. You're basically our brother, but yet we're still doing that. It's a tourist destination as well, so I'm sure the folks in the UAE are not super thrilled about that incoming to them. But what do you think the strategy is? You know, they've been using the drones. Their capabilities, as Lucas told us, have been going down, but they're not stopping. Is it like scorched earth, we're just going to do everything we can on the way out? What do you think that means?
Well, I truly don't know what their war strategy is, and I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone that's got close enough to explain that to me. A lot of folks we have on are taking past experience and applying it to this, and this is a different situation. I think their diplomatic strategy is to apply the pressure in Strait of Hormuz and use economic leverage to try to calm things down. I just don't know if that's going to work. I mean, President Trump says, hey, the U.S. Navy will clear it out. The problem is, there's one problem are the mines within the water. The other problem is what can be shot from land to the water. And so I think they're going to have to continue their campaign of eliminating opportunities to shoot into the Strait of Hormuz before they can truly open it up.
And 𝗖cie, they've really distanced a lot of who maybe they thought were their regional, at least in some sense, partners. I wouldn't say allies, but the Middle East looks a lot different today than it has in the past. That's partly because of President Trump's work there and strengthening his relationships with other folks in the region. But Iran right now feels pretty isolated. I guess Russia's giving them some intelligence, but other than that, feels like they're kind of going at it alone.
Well, yeah, and also with like friends like that, who needs enemies? If all of their neighbors, they're attacking all of their neighbors, that doesn't help. I'm really curious, when the president says unconditional surrender, what does that mean to each different party? What does that mean to the United States in terms of length of time and costs? But also, what does that mean to Israel? And does that match what it means to the president of the United States? And also, what does that mean to Iran? Because right now, they're lobbying threats still to our U.S. Navy should they go ahead to the Strait of Hormuz to escort any other ships. They've said we are waiting for their presence, and they've laid out a threat. So yes, they continue to isolate themselves.
Yeah. And again, the Dubai angle of this, we saw from Lucas's reporting, the airport there. He says folks are just going about their business as normal. We know that's a huge tourist destination. Yeah. It's the life of luxury. A lot of expats go to Dubai because of the safety it promises, or it once did. But what do you make of them pointing a lot of their fire at Dubai and their neighbors?
I saw a great clip this week, Tommy, guys. Jon Stewart actually talking about when you are in a 2-on-1 beatdown and you're the one in that 2-on-1 beatdown. Yeah. It appears that Iran's strategy is to just start punching everybody else in the bar, right? So that appears to be the case, and obviously it shows in places like Dubai a complete disrespect for the Iranian military, that they're not going to be able to get anything major through because they almost are out of complete firepower because we've almost taken everything out. And I think maybe they had a plan going into this war. They didn't realize how hard they would get hit. So to quote not just Jon Stewart in this segment, but Mike Tyson to end it, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yeah. And they've been punched in the mouth about 100,000 times. And now there is no plan. It appears to be, like Joey said, there is no central command and control. It's just throw it out there and hope something lands. And that eventually is going to be completely down to zero, I would think, sooner rather than later, Tommy.
And to Joey's point, every time they maybe think they have somebody that's going to take the reins, then that person is no longer with us. So, yeah, you know,
we've got varsity, JV. What's below the JV? Because we're at that point.
I think we're at that point. All right, to much more serious news. Today mourns the loss of the 6 U.S. service members who were killed while supporting Operation Epic Fury. Take a look.
Very sad situation. To greet the families of the heroes coming home from Iran, coming home in a different manner than they thought they'd be coming home. but they're great heroes in our country, and we're going to keep it that way.
Dignified transfer earlier today at Dover Air Force Base, where he was joined by First Lady Melania Trump and members of his cabinet. Joey, I want to turn to you on this. I mean, when you look at the loss of life here, some of these folks that lost their life fighting and defending our country, very young. Iowa took a big hit here, and there's no way that you can talk about this without extreme sorrow and heartbreak for their families. I appreciated the words from President Trump. What do you make of a day like today?
We can't let this be a side conversation. Any American out there, regardless of their politics, if they have an opinion about this war based on the fact that we lost 6 American heroes, I want to hear it. I think the president, the secretary of war, the vice president should and want to hear it. It is a part of our country. We have this opportunity to weigh in on things as people, and I don't want to see any Americans' lives leveraged for an undefined objective. That's why Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have to bring their defined objectives to the podium, either through Caroline or through themselves, and answer to the American people. And I think they're trying to do that without telling the enemy what they're doing. I think they're going to take arrows, political arrows, that are warranted, because you can't tell the people everything while you're doing it. How short this is will determine my opinion of it. If we can get this done in a few weeks and then they start answering those questions and explaining those defined objectives, I'm in a good place with it. I understand there is a reason to want Iran to not have the regime it's had and to weaken China and even Russia in that way, because that's their pathway into the Middle East. But is there a reason to leverage American lives because the diplomacy didn't go well, because Saudi Arabia wants you to do it? All those are appropriate criticisms at the right time. Maybe not right now today, but all of those criticisms are predicated on the fact that we have lost American lives in this fight. So it better be worth it, and it better be righteous, and it better be defined.
𝗖cie, what do you make of the messaging coming out of the administration and the cabinet? President Trump has said more than once, lives will be lost, and also said it will not be in vain. But, he has mentioned that this is the cost of war, and he's been pretty frank about that from the times we've heard him comment on this, obviously expressing extreme sorrow for the families and for the service and sacrifice, but also saying there will be a cost.
I think being honest and frank with the American people is the most important thing a president can do when you're talking about the men and women of the military and putting their lives on the line. And we saw that cost today. I think there are so many Americans who watch this today and see the president standing there on the tarmac, and I think it just sits in a very heavy way, and it makes us have conversations as well, questions regarding how this administration is talking to the American people about this. But I think it's a conversation, and conversations are messy, because sometimes, like, the Secretary of State will say something and maybe it sounds a little bit different than what they heard the Secretary of War say. But it's a conversation, and I think they're doing the best they can to come forward with whatever they have and also say, our hearts are breaking too.
I just want to point out one more thing real quick.
Sure.
These troops weren't ground infantry troops.
Right.
And I only point that out to say anyone in theater is in danger. And to just think about that as you meet veterans that come back from service or people that come back from war, no matter what their deployment looked like or whatever, they may be able to go to a shopping mall in the afternoon, doesn't mean they couldn't be killed in the morning. And that just shows you the heroism of everyone serving right now.
Yeah, that's an important note to make as well. And, as we mentioned, a lot of these folks on this list we're looking at I believe, are from Iowa. So, this stretches far and wide, and it's not an easy day for anybody. I think the president delivered a beautiful message. I think him being there, I didn't notice him checking his watch at any point, so that was important. But he understands the gravity of the situation.
Absolutely, and I'll be very quick here. This has to be defined, as Joey said. It also has to be relatively quick for the American people to put up with it. They do not want another Iraq. They do not want another Afghanistan. The way it's going right now, it looks like this could be relatively quick, but this is something that, if it goes on for months and months, politically will be an absolute travesty for the Republican Party and for President Trump, because Democrats will take over and there will be a huge blue wave if this continues many, many months after we're talking right now.
We're going to have a lot of time to discuss that as well, because that's going to be a big topic of conversation tonight. On that note, still ahead on a jam-packed big weekend show, we'll continue to monitor Operation Epic Fury. And in the next hour, Israel's ambassador to the UN joins us to talk about Israel's part in the war. And plus, Tim Walz, Keith Ellison on the hot seat in Capitol Hill this week. House Oversight Chairman James Comer joins us at 7 p.m. with details on that hearing and more. But first, it's been a showdown in the Lone Star State. Who will President Trump choose to back in the Texas Senate primary race? We're going to talk about that one next.
Get involved in the Texas GOP Senate primary after John Cornyn and Ken Paxton advanced to a runoff. The president says he is close to endorsing a candidate and wants whoever he doesn't pick to go ahead and get out. Trump is reportedly leaning towards Cornyn after some initial pushback by Paxton. The AG seems open to the idea only if the Senate kills the filibuster and passes the Save America Act, something he says Cornyn is not willing to do. Tommy, so I have a lot of friends in Texas. I have a lot of friends that support Paxton, actually. But Paxton comes with a tremendous amount of baggage.
Yeah.
Cornyn has his own kind of rhino things that people levy against him, whether that's warranted or not. So neither one of them, I guess, are incredibly popular among MAGA right now. But if President Trump puts an endorsement out there, I feel like that should win the day.
It should, and I'm very intrigued by this conversation about the Save America Act and leveraging that. Now, I believe there are some indications that this could be a deal as far as Senator Cornyn is concerned. If Paxton were to drop out, he would push for the Save America Act, the talking filibuster, and get this thing across the finish line. I think it's important to President Trump as well. You know how I feel about it. I think it's, quite frankly, the only thing that matters in American politics right now is getting this thing passed. But I think that's a very interesting proposition, and I hope that that's the case, because that would be, in terms of Paxton, I think that would be a very patriotic thing to do. Hey, I'm willing to take a back seat if we can get the Save America Act across the finish line, and if I can have your word that you're willing to do it. That, to me, is a big deal. And it's of big importance to the conversation in the moment right now surrounding the midterms and what we need to do to show Republican voters that Republicans are willing to fight.
Joe, Tommy brings up a great idea. We have senator after senator on this show, and just about every one of them's like, yeah, I think that we should move past the filibuster, but there's no movement. Nobody ever does anything about it.
That's the whole thing, right? It's all talk and no action. And the SAVE Act is something that, again, this is an 85-15 issue. Should you show ID when you go to vote the same way you go onto an airplane, same way when you rent a car, the same thing if you want to buy a bottle of liquor, it does not matter. So this is something that even black voters, Democratic voters, overwhelmingly support. And a lot of Republicans, especially our viewers out there, are saying, why can't this just be passed through a talking filibuster? Here's what we do know. If President Trump endorses here, and he will, whoever he endorses wins this race. He is the ultimate kingmaker. I saw a stat this week that shows that 97% of Donald Trump's endorsements in primaries, that person wins. So whoever gets the endorsement here, Cornyn or Paxton, will not only obviously get the Republican nomination, will defeat James Tallarico, the guy who believes that God is binary and that trans people should get non-binary, excuse me, and that the government should pay for abortions for trans. And I could go on, but let's give it to
Alicia. It is kind of interesting that Paxton may make this Senate race, the general election, about the Save America Act, regardless of who the Republican is.
I find this standoff fascinating. The fact that Paxton is negotiating with the president, but also negotiating with the U.S. Senate so that he can drop out if he decides to drop out, if he's the one who's asked to, so that Republicans don't spend all this money and time beating each other up getting to the general election, because that's really what's important here. It's the money behind this. It's the time behind this. Why give Tallarico so much runway when they can get to it right away?
Yeah, and Joe, you brought it up. You know, James Tallarico won the primary. He took down Jasmine Crockett in the state's Democrat primary. So with that in mind, knowing that James Tallarico is painting himself as this almost religious minister. Jasmine Crockett isn't doing so well. She's upset. She thinks that she was outed of her opportunity by Republicans because she says that they kind of stacked the deck on the election. Let's take a look.
We don't have any of the results because there was a lot of confusion today. I can tell you now that people have been disenfranchised. Unfortunately, this is what Republicans like to do. And so targeted Dallas County, and I think we all know why.
Yeah, it's funny. Trump's response to 𝗖𝗏 winning was calling Jasmine Crockett incredibly talented now that she's lost.
Of course, yeah.
But, 𝗖𝗏, he says he's confident he can win the blue state and that his, radical far left views maybe aren't that big a deal. What do you think?
Oh, well, he's trying to portray himself as a moderate, yet he believes also that the government should run the entire health care system. I got a couple of quotes here. Did they teach you in Sunday school that Jesus Christ himself was a radical feminist? Yeah, that's pretty moderate. The Texas Capitol can be a hostile environment for our trans neighbors. Our office is the first in the history of the Capitol to add pronouns to our business cards. Oh, man. I mean, this works in New York, in Minneapolis, in Chicago, and Seattle. It ain't going to work in the Lone Star State. That is certainly for certain here. Jasmine Crockett, don't worry about her. She will be a co-host on The View within a year.
She should be.
Save the tape right now.
I think she should. I think she's great for TV. Tell me, what are your thoughts on James 𝗖𝗏, I guess probably versus Cornyn?
Yeah. Again, I think a lot of Republicans are maybe disappointed in their options in Texas. You'd think a state like Texas, so deep red, that you could come up with something maybe a little bit better than the choices we were offered here. But at the end of the day, a seat is a seat. I put a caveat on that, though, because if you're not able to pass the Save America Act, what good is having a majority anyway? So I think that's just, the other conversation is important. But as far as 𝗖𝗏 goes, who knew that he could make someone like Jasmine Crockett look more moderate, right? I love the strategy here, though, because, a lot of folks didn't really know on a national level much about this guy. They just knew that he kind of cosplayed as this white Christian man from Texas. But then when you start diving into his past tweets, 2020 to present, there's a real treasure trove there that I can't wait to just lay on thick from now until then.
We don't even have to just go to tweets. We've got some of his best and most controversial positions right here. Take a look.
I have met so many Hindus, Buddhists, Sikh, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, who are more Christ-like than some of the Christians I serve with in the Texas legislature.
Our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat.
Before God comes over Mary and we have the incarnation, God asks for Mary's consent. So to me, that is an affirmation in one of our most central stories that creation has to be done with consent.
Our trans community needs abortion care too. There are many more than 2 biological sexes. In fact, there are 6. God is non-binary.
All right, 𝗖𝗏, listen, I'm not saying that all of Texas is deep red Christian conservative, but man, they sure vote that way a lot. And I don't know how much of this will actually come back to haunt him.
I think it's going to continue to haunt him because these are all campaign commercials that were just basically written for Republicans. However, I will say Republican strategists know that as deep red as Texas has always been, it is not a place that they can take for granted, especially when you consider Democratic turnout for the primaries. It's nothing to sneeze at. And 𝗖𝗏, even though he's incredibly controversial and says things that may fly in California and they don't seem like they would fly in Texas, he's still someone who has to be dealt with in the general.
I will say this, he ran a really good ground game. His strategy for that primary, because he came in after Crockett Howard had a big lead, and he knew exactly what he needed to do to win. And you can't overlook that. I don't care what the politics of the state are. Everything is purple these days, it feels like. All right, still ahead, Democrats spent Jesse Jackson's memorial trashing President Trump, despite the wishes of his son. We're going to explain that. But first, a major shakeup in Trump's cabinet with Kristi Noem out as DHS Secretary and Senator Markwayne Mullin. You've seen him on this show a lot. He's taking over. We're going to discuss next.
Kristi Noem is out as DHS Secretary, with President Trump picking Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin to replace her. Listen.
We're super excited about the opportunity, and we're going to, do the best we can. We're going to get Department of Homeland Security making sure that we stay focused on protecting the homeland. And no matter if you support me, you don't support me, I'm going to be laser focused on getting that done.
Now, Noem caused some controversy this week when the Senate pressed her over whether or not the White House approved a major taxpayer-funded ad for DHS.
The president approved ahead of time you spending $220 million running TV ads across the country in which you are featured prominently.
Yes, sir. We went through the legal processes, did it correctly,
did the president
worked
know
with
you were going to do
OMB.
this?
Yes.
He did?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. To me, it puts the president in a terribly awkward spot. And I'm not saying you're not telling the truth. It's just hard for me to believe.
Interesting that grilling came from the Republican side. After the hearing, President Trump told Reuters in a phone interview that he, quote, never knew anything about it, unquote, and shortly after announced that Noem would be replaced with Mullen. All right, Joey, lots to discuss here.
Coming to me.
Take it away, sir.
Yeah, so if you've listened to Kennedy's interview since then, it feels a little bit like a coordinated attack here. I think that maybe not President Trump, but I think the White House knew it was time to move on for a ton of reasons. I wish they would have leveraged this to get the DHS bill passed. If you're going to remove her anyway, use it as leverage. Let the Democrats have their 5 minutes of celebration and get DHS funded, because right now that's the most important thing. I think that she has done a tremendous job in a lot of places in that position, but I've spoken to a lot of people at DHS that weren't happy, and for no other reason than that. Sometimes it's just you got to shake things up, and that makes sense. Minneapolis, I think, was the final nail in the coffin. I really do.
Yeah.
I think that decision was made then, but President Trump is loyal to those loyal to him, so he's not going to embarrass her in a way that puts all the blame on her. He's going to take accountability for what he needed to change, and he did when he made the moves.
Yeah.
He alluded to, we could have done it differently. We're going to do it differently, and she's put in a position, hopefully, to be more successful now.
You look back on 2017, Tommy, and you see the first Trump term and all the turnover that happened in year one in his cabinet. This is the first major firing of a major cabinet member. We are about 13 and a half months in, but most people that support the president, if not all, seem to think that this was the right move, because not because Noem wasn't doing a good job, if you look at the numbers, say, in terms of border crossings and in terms of deportations, but the fact that her messaging with the media was uneven and sometimes irresponsible.
Yeah, what bothers me a little bit more about this, perhaps, is that ad, $220 million. I don't know how you spend $220 million riding a horse by Mount Rushmore. I'm from Rapid City, South Dakota. Mount Rushmore is the backdrop of where I grew up. I don't know how you spend that much to do that. And I'll tell you this, we have to be very, very fair here. If we're calling out Democrats in Minnesota for their fraud and their layering centers, then you got to call it out on your own side as well. And you got to say, hey, the math ain't math in here. What was going on with this ad? You become a sideshow. You become the topic of conversation. That's not a good thing when immigration is so important to this president, so important to those who voted for President Trump. First and foremost, a lot of folks voted based on immigration. So yes, the border is sealed, thank goodness. Tom Homan has done a fantastic job. We can give Christie her flowers for what she did to add to that effort. But when you become the story and your antics off the job become the story, then you lose the plot. So I think this was a fantastic decision. We'll see how Senator Mullen does in this role. But Christie had to go. And also, I would say, justice for cricket.
And from a media perspective, 𝗚িcia, as far as Markwayne Mullin, as he's been on this show a lot, he does a lot of interviews, not just on this network, but on others as well. And he is as serious as a tax audit.
Yes, he does a lot of defending and a lot of explaining on behalf of the administration. And I would argue he does a pretty good job. So I think right now, he would seem he wouldn't have too difficult of a time in the Senate. Democrats, however, have said they're still going to be Democrats, and so they're going to do what they can to muck up the process. I don't know how well that's going to go over with the American people, because they really, this was a distraction. I mean, the president came into office, waste, fraud, and abuse, waste, fraud, and abuse. You have $220 million on a vanity project. I don't know, is anyone watching Meghan McCain on X on this? She has been comparing the cost of Game of Thrones episodes to the cost of Oscar-winning or Oscar-nominated films to the cost of this, and they pale in comparison.
Yeah.
This is not over.
Game of Thrones is very well produced.
Yes.
I've been watching it again recently. Anyway, enough about that. It didn't take long for Democrats to start celebrating Kristi Noem's firing, of course, but Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is taking it a step further. And it sounds like he's out for revenge, hinting at an investigation into Noem. Listen.
What should accountability for Kristi Noem, given everything she's done, look like, in your view?
Well, and there needs to be, and I think that's one of our founding principles, that no one's above the law and they're accountable. I would just say at this time that that former Secretary Noem should probably get used to spending more time in Minnesota, because I have a pretty good feeling in the future she may be doing that, because we have got to get accountability.
Tommy, the hubris of goofy 80s sitcom dad, Tim Walz, who is under investigation himself, who has run Minnesota into being basically Mogadishu now, talking about accountability. But nevertheless, I think Noam's going to be on a hot seat, at least from Democrats, for some time, because they see this as a weakness in an otherwise loyal and flawless cabinet in terms of President Trump's eyes to this point.
I want to be very clear. This does not show weakness in the Trump cabinet or the Trump administration whatsoever, because the Trump administration, President Trump did what he had to do. He fixed the problem. Democrats with Mayorkas, when our border was a wide open free-for-all, when tens of millions of people were coming in from God knows where, here to do God knows what, they thought that that guy was doing a great job. So this is not a weakness. This is a strength. President Trump, he is the ultimate boss. And if somebody's not doing their job properly, he has shown that he is willing to take you out of that position and replace you with someone he feels can do a better job. This is not a weakness. This is a strength. He made the right decision, and he's unafraid to do that. That's why we love President Trump.
It's an excellent point, Joey, because after Afghanistan, for example, and that disastrous withdrawal where 13 U.S. service members were blown up at Abbey Gate, not one person was fired. No one was ever fired from the Secret Service, for example, for the Trump assassination.
Who was
fired? Take it from here.
Who was fired?
In the Biden administration?
Yeah.
I can't name a major person who was actually like that.
I can't remember one. Obviously, maybe I don't remember those personalities as much as I do the ones that are in the administration now. I don't remember anyone getting fired. I think part of firing anyone is taking accountability because you're the one that hired them, right? And so President Trump takes accountability anytime he moves someone out of a position. Mike Waltz is another thing, who's doing fantastic, by the way, who's doing his job very well right now. So, you know, President Trump assembled this team, almost team of rivals. You think about RFK Jr. and 𝗖cie Gabbard.
Yeah.
The last president to do that actually was Lincoln, and it was very successful in winning a civil war, much less changing the fabric of this country when it comes to slavery. So he assembled a team of rivals that reflected the populist views of the majority of Americans. He put them in positions. If he didn't bat 1,000, plugging everyone in the right spot, I think he got real close. And I think we're seeing that with some of the military operations with Secretary of Defense, now Secretary of War, that they had a lot of criticisms of. So I think I'm going to put my faith into the guy who served a term, learned a lot of lessons, and is really doing very well when it comes to cabinet picks in this term. I do think this was the right move, and I wish Kristi Noem the best in the new job she has.
Absolutely. And Alicia, we'll talk more in the next segment if you don't mind. I'm being told that we have to go to tease. And coming up, the Trump doctrine is going into full effect, and Cuba has reason to be very concerned. But first, Trump wants to be involved in picking Iran's next leader, but the regime seems to be set on choosing Ayatollah Khomeini's son. Really, stick around.
Mama. Iran's assembly of experts is reportedly expected to meet and possibly choose its next supreme leader within the next 24 hours. And one of the leading candidates to take over the job is the Ayatollah's son, Mojtaba Khomeini. But President Trump says he wants to be personally involved in picking the nation's next leader, and says that selecting Mojtaba would be a waste of time, calling him a, quote, lightweight, and saying the choice would be unacceptable. Mojtaba's policies are similar to his father's, and he was sanctioned by the U.S. back in 2019 for advancing the regime's agenda. Now President Trump made it clear the U.S. will not tolerate more of the same.
Mr. President, what's the worst case scenario that you have planned for in Iran?
The worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person. You go through this and then in 5 years you realize you put somebody in who is no better. So we'd like to see somebody in there that's going to bring it back for the people, and we'll see what happens with the people.
Okay, so Joey, I'll begin with you because you brought this up earlier. It's really interesting as we're supposed to hear this news in the next 24 hours, reportedly, but whoever this next person is, it's like automatically handing them a target to just put right on their back.
It certainly seems that way, especially as long as we're still engulfed in this war. Unless it's someone that the administration thinks they can work with, then maybe it does change things. And I think that's what President Trump is signaling now. It's like, listen, your next move better be a smart one, because I can do this all day. I can hit this little button and throw bombs on you all day. That's the position. If that comes to fruition. In fact, I don't know. I'm not on the ground. But it certainly seems that way. What they're able to send in both missiles and drones has decreased by 90 and 80 some odd % respectively. It seems to me like they're either holding their cards because they know they don't have a lot left, or they've run out.
Yeah, and Tommy, I think we do have a list that we can put up of the potential successors. Folks can just see the list here, but you can see you have senior Shiite cleric, you have the son of Khomeini, and another grandson of the founder of the Islamic Republic. This is not what regime change looks like. This is the regime.
Right. Well, and you have to look at the people, right, that have been protesting so nobly and so bravely for so many months now. What do they want? And, up until this point, they've been rather quiet and they haven't taken over their government. I think they're waiting to see who's in place. But, there's a lot of discussion, at least amongst the Persian people here in the United States and around the world, about if there's a possibility to go back to what it looked like to more westernized, more modernized culture, and not having the religious zealots run the show. Is that possible? I think that the Iranian people would love the opportunity for that, as much as I can tell from their conversations, and of course those that are living in the United States. I don't know if that's possible. I think that would be the ultimate goal, the ideal, but I would love to see the Iranian people weigh in here, and maybe there is a true chance that this region could look completely different, maybe go back to what it once was. That would be the hope.
However, Conch, the IRGC is so closely related here to all power inside of Iran. And right now they are pushing for the son. They're campaigning, if you want to call it that in American terms. They're pushing so hard. That doesn't indicate any change whatsoever. And one other thing I'll add, this completely, to put the son in, this goes completely against the whole reason his father was brought into power, because the revolutionaries at the time in 1979 were completely against any sort of political dynasty.
Of course. And what I think the president in Trump is counting on is a Venezuelan repeat. In other words, 𝗆cie Rodriguez right now is the president of Venezuela. At first, Rodriguez had resisted the Trump administration. Obviously, she had worked under Maduro, and now she is working with the administration. Trump just saying today, President of Venezuela, 𝗆cie Rodriguez, is doing a great job working with us. I mean, she's doing a good job because she's working with us. If she wasn't working with us, I would say she's not doing a good job. So they want somebody like that. But in Venezuela, that's a lot easier to find than in Iran, where you have all these layers of people from the old regime that, despite all the people we've taken out, you're not going to find a moderate anytime soon, it appears.
I just don't see how we get a name by the end of the weekend. We'll see. Maybe we'll be talking about it tomorrow. Ahead, Operation Epic Fury has shown the full power of the U.S. military. We'll break down some of the new state-of-the-art weapons being used. But first, gas prices are rising as the war disrupts the world's oil supplies. But the Trump administration is working to keep them from spiraling. We'll explain next.
We planned well for retirement, but
Ты не забывай, мы потерянный рай, что в тебе таится малая, но не забирай, пока небо сохранит тот май в ней, пока в небо еще сил набрать. Последний февраль, мысли унесут к осенним ветрам, где минутам, где нелюдно с тобой уютно. Днем и ночью терял рассудок для тебя.
President Trump is calming fears at home as the war in Iran is starting to have an impact on Americans' pocketbooks.
My administration announced decisive action to help keep down the oil prices, including offering political risk insurance for tankers transiting into the Gulf. Further action to reduce pressure on oil is imminent. In the long term, the actions we're taking will dramatically increase the stability of the region and oil prices.
Since last week, gas prices have shot up 43 cents, according to AAA. Prices are expected to rise further as attacks on oil fields continue and traffic through that Strait of Hormuz shrinks. But the administration indicated they're working to end the disruption, as Energy Secretary Chris Wright says the U.S. Navy could soon begin escorting those commercial vessels.
All of their focus right now is to suppress Iran's ability to wreak havoc on their neighbors and on Americans in the area. So first, we got to get their ability to cause trouble way down. And then as soon as it's reasonable to do it, we'll escort ships through the straits and get the energy moving again.
So So, Joe, I think the American people are willing to sit tight for a few weeks and let this thing play out if it's for the greater good, as they say. But if it stretches much longer than that, and the impacts on the gas prices that impact the prices of everything else, as we know, if that lasts much longer than that, I think you're going to see a little bit of impatience, which is really such a shame, too, because this president has worked so hard up until now on getting those gas prices down. American energy independence, still obviously a priority.
Sure.
But, you know, this kind of shakes the boat a little bit.
Yeah, Tommy, as you said, patience is fine now among a majority of the American people on things like this. It was largely expected, given what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz particularly. But if we get to, say, Memorial Day, which is about 2.5 months away, and then suddenly travel really begins to pick up, particularly people driving their cars to other parts of the country, and these prices are still where they are, that is going to be, again, I'll go back to the same theme. This will hurt Republicans in the midterms, where Democrats don't need to get an A+ in terms of their performance there. They just need to win back about 4 or 5 seats, and you have House Speaker Hakeem Jeffries and Donald Trump in impeachment for perpetuity. But I have a feeling that this thing's going to be resolved, where gas prices are back down to where they were, which is one of the big achievements of the first year of Trump's second term.
We're all hoping for that. Joey, in terms of having the U.S. Navy escort some of these ships, how effective do you think that could be?
Well, it may be effective. It's going to be risky. It's going to be costly. There's not just the threat of mines in the Strait of Hormuz. There's the threat of being shot at from the land. I think that in order to really implement this in a safe way that really makes these shipping companies feel good about it, we're going to have to continue the bombing campaign and show that air superiority and interdiction superiority that we need to have. That's why we have so much there. It's why we have a third carrier strike group coming in. So it's not that we don't have it. It's just, you know, we start expending all of our munitions on something like this, and what do we do if something else pops off in a month or two? It worries me. I think that we need to just get this over with. That's what I want to see happen.
I think we're all joining in that chorus here. 𝗖cie, you know, to Joe's point as well about how much pain the American people are willing to withstand if this is in fact a short campaign. We get in, we get out, we get it done. But in terms of American energy independence, you know, President Trump has said that's why I want to produce more at home, so we're less reliant on that part of the world and the volatility. So it's interesting to me that Democrats are now talking about gas prices because they didn't want to give them any credit for their gas prices going down. But now they're really upset.
Also America first now, right? Exactly. So the messaging continues to change. No, it is very interesting to watch. But to Joey's point, and the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. Navy there, it could be a more complicated conversation should the U.S. Navy take on any sort of hits, as Iran has promised, should those escorts become reality.
Certainly. All right, still ahead. The far-left media is portraying the deceased Ayatollah as a saint instead of a tyrant. Oh, imagine that. But first, we're going to check back with our team on the ground in the Middle East for the latest developments there. Plus, we're so happy to be joined by Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon. He's here to talk about the latest in Operation Epic Fury.